Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host here. We're going to talk with Alan Saunders. As I said, we talked a little bit in our emergency episode about the Mike Tomlin extension, but I want to talk more about this in depth. What are the biggest challenges he faces to get this team back to playoff success, and breaking down more of what's led into the playoff problems the Steelers have had over the last 7 years. It's the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Alan Saunders from SteelersNow.com. Alan, big news, of course, came out Monday. The Steelers signed Mike Tomlin to a 3-year extension. Now, this was no shock to you or I because we kind of knew this was coming down the line. There were some people saying, "Oh, it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe they're going to let him go." And then, of course, they signed him to the extension, like you and I said they would. But I kind of broke that. First, I gave my initial reaction. I want your initial reaction to when this news got announced. What were the first things that you thought about this?
I guess I didn't really have much of one. I knew it was happening. I'm not surprised by it. I don't honestly think it means that much. Mike Tomlin, because I think the far more likely way that these two parties decide to separate is that Mike Tomlin decides that he doesn't want to do it anymore.
Right.
And the contract doesn't mean that he can't do that at any time. And let's not pretend like the Steelers don't have more than enough money to eat a contract if they have to. Right. So, I think it's just a necessary part of doing business. If you want somebody to continue to be your coach, you don't let him go into the last year of his contract. It's just the way the NFL works. I honestly don't really think it means I hesitate to try to find a deeper meaning here. I don't think it just means that the Steelers still want Mike Tomlin to be their coach, which we already know.
Right. And so I don't think there's any deeper meaning needed here, but I think there is a division in the fan base about Mike Tomlin and the role he's played in certain successes and certain failures. And honestly, going by my comment section, I think the division is a lot less towards the middle than some people think. I think there's a lot more people that appreciate Mike Tomlin than what people estimate. I think there is a very loud contingent of people who think that Mike Tomlin is the end-all, be-all reason why the Steelers haven't won a playoff game since the 2016-2017 playoffs. But I look at this and I ask myself, if I'm going to gauge what Mike Tomlin's biggest challenges are for this team coming up, I think a big part of it is, one, fixing what's been going on in the offense. There's been their efforts in that, and we'll get into more in that later. We'll have a clip from Broderick Jones we play later in the show. But two, I think that they've got to make this group mesh somehow between the units, play complementary football. That's something that Mike Tomlin used to say a lot. And he still does say it sometimes, but that used to be the big thing that he would talk about. You got to play complementary football. The Steelers haven't played complementary football for years. It's been defense with a little bit of offense at the end. It would, if the Steelers defense can stay at an elite level like they have been in several of in the past several seasons, and the offense can get to a middle ground, that could be the key that puts them over the top. That's what got them their last Super Bowl. That's what they were like when Mike Tomlin was coaching the best teams that he had, or at least the most successful teams that he had. And I think the challenge is getting it to that point while navigating the NFL world that is injuries and everything else that happens.
I agree with that. I also don't think they're they're not that it's hard to say they're close either. This is a team that is probably, again, a 500 talent team. It's you go look at Vegas, they think it's an average team. I think they're going to do better than that. I think Mike Tomlin's a lot of reason for that. Mm-hmm. They've done better than that a lot recently. But they also don't have the pieces, and it's not clear how they're going to get the pieces right now. Maybe it's Russell Wilson. Maybe it's Justin Fields. I don't know. look, I think if you the whole thing about the playoffs, and we'll get to that, is one thing, but like you cannot separate the performance of the coach and the quarterback in the NFL right now. Who do you think the best coach in the NFL is?
Everyone's going to say Andy Reid. Yeah.
Okay. If you give the Steelers Andy Reid, do you think they're a Super Bowl favorite now?
No.
All right. Now, if you give the Steelers Patrick Mahomes, are they a Super Bowl favorite?
Absolutely. How about the
right? Like, period. That's if you don't have that guy, you have a limited ceiling. Like, can you still do it? Well, maybe. I mean, the Lions got to the conference championship game last year. They don't have a quarterback. Okay, like whatever. You can have good seasons. You can get yourself close where you can put yourself in a position where maybe if people get injured and things break just the right way, it could happen for you. We've seen it happen here and there, over the last 20, 30 years, maybe 2-3 times, where a team with a quarterback situation like what the Steelers have right now make it to the Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl. It's not very likely. And I don't think that should reflect negatively on the head coach. Like it just doesn't. Now, I mean, I think you can look at some of the missteps on offense over the years and say, what was happening here? I mean, I think it's been 3 bad offensive coordinator hires in a row. I think we can say that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the first round pick of Kenny Pickett did not work out the way they thought it would. But I don't know how much of any of those things I am willing to attribute or solely attribute to Mike Tomlin.
Wait,
I think
a
lot
second.
of people.
You said just to make sure. You said 3 bad offensive coordinator hires. There was Fichtner. There was Canada.
Yeah, I mean, and then Todd Haley did a good job when he was here, but clearly the personalities just didn't work. I mean,
okay, I got you.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't sustainable.
Right? I thought I missed somebody. That's why I was just checking.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly none of those worked out. I mean, since Bruce Arians has left, they have not had a happy, copacetic offensive coordinator situation. And so, yeah, I mean that's got to. But Mike Tomlin is in many ways a figurehead. He's a very comfortable figurehead. He's the person that is the public spokesperson for Steelers decisions, but that doesn't mean they're all him. That's a team effort. I think one of the very interesting things to watch over the last few years has been the way things fell apart after Belichick lost Tom Brady, and the way things happened in Pittsburgh after Tomlin lost Ben Roethlisberger. And you kind of compare and contrast. Yeah, the owners and the coaches are different people, but Belichick was always someone who demanded full and final authority on every decision. He wanted to make all the draft picks, all the trades. He was in charge of everything. And when things go badly, when you are in charge of everything, you are the only person that can hold the bag.
Right.
Mike Tomlin, I don't believe, has ever sought that level of power and control. He's always worked with a very strong general manager. He has a relatively football-involved owner who does make football decisions. Like, it's not like Art Rooney is just a guy writing checks in an office building somewhere. He's in practice just as often as I am, maybe more. And so there's this, 3-headed monster that makes the big football decisions. Now, you change out one of those pieces. How much have things changed for the Pittsburgh Steelers when you flop Kevin Colbert from Omar Khan? I think we're seeing a whole, a new mindset, a new attitude, like a whole bunch of different stuff. And it's like, clearly not one guy is running this ship. And so that means when things don't go badly, the other two aren't just going to make him a scapegoat. That's not how it's going to work. They're going to stick together as a team. And, certainly Mike Tomlin is far from a perfect coach. But I think when you look at the coaching environment, you look at the success rate of NFL coaching hires, I think it's pretty hard to justify the risk of making a move, because there's a pretty good chance that if you hired a new coach, he would not be better. That's just the math of the situation. Even the Eagles, who navigated a very, very successful transition away from a legendary coach, they still had to fail once and got bad, right? Like it
got really bad.
You have to, if you're going to make that move, you have to do it knowing that more likely than not, the next coach is going to be worse. Like that's just the facts of the matter.
No, absolutely. I'm right with you on that. And I think that's where I don't think that it's just an easy, just get rid of the guy. And it's that much simpler. And I brought this up in the emergency podcast episode, which you can go check out as our episode that I released yesterday afternoon. But, a lot of people make that Eagles Andy Reid comparison. But one, like you said, the first coach that was hired after Andy Reid tanked the team, and it took going to a whole other person after that to kind of get there. And then the other thing was, if you're the Eagles, would you rather have what you have now? Sure, you got one ring, or would you rather have Andy Reid, who has 3 rings, and Patrick Mahomes? And not saying that it's for sure thing that he.
Yeah, I mean, there was
Patrick
personal
Mahomes.
mess there, but
there was also personal mess.
There was personal mess there, but Andy Reid's a better coach than everybody the Eagles have had the whole time.
Exactly.
Period.
And that's my point, is that them giving him away, and also, like, they went 4-12 his last season, and there was personal stuff going on. Like, there were reasons why they let go. The Steelers have never fell to those depths or had those kind of problems to deal with Mike Tomlin as head coach, which is, I think, a big reason why he hasn't been fired. And if you're thinking, well, just do it anyways to get the results the Eagles got, again, Andy Reid is doing so much better somewhere else. Well, the Eagles did get 1 ring, but it was not directly tied to their decision to just get rid of a coach here. I want to ask you the question, though, Alan. I want to get into your thoughts about the lack of playoff success the Steelers have had, how much of a role Mike Tomlin plays in certain things, and how they can get back to having playoff success during the time of the rest of this new extended contract. We'll get into that more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and the more that you can bet on all those things on FanDuel. After the Celtics won games 1 and 2, the Mavericks need to respond Wednesday, and that means FanDuel has them up 1.5 points with the over-under set at 213 points. Right now, new customers get $200 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 or bet when they make their first bet on FanDuel Sportsbook. That's $200 that you can use to bet on everything from the NBA Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park in the next Major League Baseball game. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon for new customers to get $200 back in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins, and that's on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We got Alan Saunders here. Alan, I want to ask you this question because I provided some of my answers to this as to why the Steelers haven't had playoff success in several years now. Under Mike Tomlin, because there's some that say, well, if you want playoff success, and that was one of the leading points that Art Rooney said in his statement released with the team when they made this announcement that Mike Tomlin was extended, was that, we believe that he's going to get us back to having playoff success. And some people say, well, if you're sticking with the same coach, how can you expect things to change there? And my answer was because he wasn't the big problem that was leading to it. But if you were to look back, Alan, what are the big things that you think have gotten in the way of the Steelers' chances at winning playoff games and the several appearances they've had over the years?
Well, I think in the last 3 playoff losses, it's very clear the Steelers just were not a very good team. Mm-hmm. Like, they were not expected to do very well. They went on the road in tough places. They played teams that were better than them, and they lost. That's the fact of that matter. And the year that they did lose at home against Cleveland, that team had a good record, but I think everybody who was paying close attention to that 2020 team kind of knew there was a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. And certainly, that was a weird year. Maybe they could have gone on a smoke and mirrors run. I don't know. Some people say the Lakers did, right? But if you want to really highlight a game where I think that was a game they should have won, that's probably one of them. But look, it's almost 2 different things, right? Those teams, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, those were Super Bowl contenders. Those teams, every time they got into a game, maybe with the one exception of that 16 AFC Championship game at New England, they kind of got ran off the field. But every other place, they got into one of those games, they went into it with a real expectation of winning the thing, moving on, and having an expectation of winning the next round too. They were a team that could have won the Super Bowl any of those years. And I think you can say that the fact that they didn't, and honestly never even really came close in that sort of 7-year span after losing to the Packers in the Super Bowl, they probably should have done better than that with the talent they had. I mean, since then, Ben Roethlisberger gets hurt in 2019. He's clearly not ever the same player when he comes back. They gave it a good shot, did their best by the old soldier, but they didn't have the guns to win in 20 and 21. And since then, clearly they don't have a quarterback. So you can't be good forever. You can't contend forever. Should Mike Tomlin have done more to capitalize on the talent that he had in the early to mid teens? Yeah, probably. But I think that's almost a complete separate issue from what's been going on these last couple of years. This is a rebuilding team. It's a young team. It's trying to get better, but I mean, like we said, they're not Super Bowl contenders. It's not that's the biggest reason. Like they just aren't that good right now.
Yeah, they've had a long way to go to rebuilding. I think that they're getting closer to that. I'm not saying that they're close right now to being a Super Bowl contender, but I think that the steps that they've taken, if the rookies that they've been drafting the last couple seasons, Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Joey Porter Jr., if those guys step into the roles the way that they're expected to, then I think the Steelers have a good chance of forming a new nucleus around new players, especially on the offensive side of the ball, especially in the offensive line, for that to be a driving force to go along with the leaders that are already there. Because let's make no mistake here, like Cam Hayward, pending to what happens with his future extension, whatever, we'll figure that out at some point. But Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, they're here to be for at least a few more years for each of them. So you still have that core of the defense. You just signed Patrick Queen. You got Joey Porter Jr. You got guys like Keanu Benton. You have a defense and a core that's going to be around. If this offensive core comes into something in the next couple seasons or so, or even this season, we start to see the remnants of that, of what it can be in the next couple years, that is going to be the team that gets the Steelers back into the Super Bowl conversation. And they still got to figure out what's going on at quarterback. They still have to figure out this, that we have to see this offense work. There's no guarantee that Arthur Smith's offense is just going to come out and roll people down the field with the run game or anything. But if they do get that from this team, if they're able to get that kind of movement from the ball, and the defense stays at the level that it's been at, or takes a step forward with some of the younger guys that they've drafted, I think they're very much in that conversation, and I think that then we see a different type of Steelers team in these playoffs. And I also think it's important, like you said, the teams that they've played, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, I think that the Chiefs, they've been on their run. But I also think some of those teams, like the Bills, I'm not so certain the Bills are going to be this superpower much longer that they've been with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs is gone. They've had to make other changes. They're hoping on some new guys to step up in the receiver room. I'm very curious to see how that team carries forward. And this might be the Steelers' chance to kind of rise up in the AFC and become one of those contenders that can be one of those better squads that have been competing.
Yeah, and I think the one thing you can definitively say about this team is, if the defense can stay healthy, which it hasn't the last couple of years, so that's certainly enough. But if the defense can stay healthy and they can run the ball like I expect them to be able to run the ball with the upgrades on the offensive line and new offense from Arthur Smith, still got Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, I think they're in a much better position to win a playoff game. Like, I think I would feel better about this team going into Buffalo or going into Kansas City in January, and being able to hang with one of those teams and maybe beat them. I feel about as good as I could feel about a team, maybe short of one wide receiver. I feel about as good of a team as I could that's not bringing that caliber of quarterback to the match, right? Like, I mean, outside of Cincinnati or a Baltimore or one of those teams, Kansas City, Buffalo, some team with a top quarterback. You even throw Miami, LA Chargers, whatever. But like anybody else, maybe Jacksonville, I don't know. Anybody else, like I feel as good about the Steelers winning some of those games as I do anybody else. I like their defense. I think they'll run the ball well. I think they have that play action offense that'll get them enough to be okay. I'm still not picking them to win the Super Bowl, and like I don't know that we even have, we're still in like we don't even know what we don't know land with these two quarterbacks, and we'll see where the future lies. But I do think they are closer to winning a playoff game, if that is something you care about. I honestly think it's the most overblown thing in Pittsburgh sports. Winning a playoff game is not an actual sign that you are close to winning anything else. Most of the time, it doesn't matter. If you win a playoff game, nobody buys their 2024 wild card champs T-shirts. No one's buying a commemorative DVD of winning a wild card game. There's no banner on the stadium for it doesn't matter. As soon as that happens, it will have been forgotten.
Yeah.
And no one that is angry right now about them not having won a playoff game will be 1% less angry for it having happened.
Right.
Because what really matters is winning the Super Bowl and at least feeling like you have a decent chance of winning the Super Bowl. Winning the playoff game. Look, there's been lots of teams who won a playoff game that we all knew had no chance to win the Super Bowl.
Right.
There's a 7-9 team that won a playoff game. You can win a play. It's not the thing that people are upset about. It doesn't matter.
And I agree with this, and I think the point that I've made this for years now, and talking about the playoffs. Are you seriously telling me that if Mike Tomlin had made it to the divisional round, every one of the years, if he had just won one playoff game and then been out after that, they'd be saying, well, he's just he's 2 and done in the playoffs. They'd make, unless he was winning Super Bowls all the time.
People used to give crap to Bill Cowher for losing AFC Championship games at home.
Exactly. And
it's the same thing.
And at the end of the day, you get the same amount of Super Bowl trophies for both results. And that's the bottom line there, that people can make this here or there, this was so much better. No, the goal was to get to the Super Bowl. It was a failure, but it's also acknowledging Cowher wasn't always at fault for everything that happened in those years when they lost.
And sticking with him turned out to be the right decision in the end.
Set up that Super Bowl and a lot of things after that too. I want to talk more about building the offense, the future of the offense, and how that's part of the objective the Steelers have with Mike Tomlin over the next 3 years. That and more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders, stick with us. We'll be right back. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders from SteelersNow.com. Alan, part of what has to happen is the offense has to find its culture and do so without someone to guide them the way that already established. That's something the Steelers defense has had for most of my life, is that there's always been a bona fide leader of the group, bona fide leaders of the group. They've passed it down. They've passed down the torch over the years. That torch,
the literal child of one of those is doing it right now.
Exactly. Literally, the Joey Porter Jr. Joey Porter Sr. was one of those guys. He was the guy that held back the team and let Jerome Bettis take his own run onto Super Bowl 40 in his hometown of Detroit. And now his son is developing into one of the leaders. Literally, that is how long it has been that the Steelers have maintained that on defense. But on offense, there's been a clear disconnect. Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger, none of them were able to pass down really anything to this current iteration of the Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger, would have these talks with Najee Harris in his last year, but clearly that wasn't the same thing as far as what the defense has been able to do. So now I think the Steelers have to rebuild the culture on offense, and that's one of the biggest challenges. I want to get your thoughts on the biggest things that have to happen for that to occur and in quick order, because if they can do it if they can, this year can be the year where they figure some things out, maybe they win a playoff game and you see the offense has taken that step forward, then next year they are in a much better place to say, all right, we're a real contender. But what is the big thing that you think has to happen this year for that culture to be there?
Well, I think they've got to identify some leaders on that offense that are not the quarterbacks. And I think it's going to be difficult because, Russell Wilson is a guy with a big personality. He's certainly going to put his stamp on this offense, and he's right to do that. But Russell Wilson is here for a short time. It's a 1-year deal. Even if things go very, very well and he gets another deal, it's not like he's going to be here for 5. Right. We're pretty sure about that. So I think they need to find some leaders on that offense that can be people that you put your flag in the ground and stand around for 10 to 15 years. And that's why you dropped offensive linemen in the first round. I really think that. I think you have guys that, 1, have long careers and you can usually retain, and 2, I think they drafted some high character guys. I think I've really been impressed by Broderick Jones in terms of what he's brought to the table as a young guy. He's actually younger than Troy Fautanu and Mason McCormick are, but he has really embraced the idea of being a leader, of being a follow-me kind of guy for that offensive line. I think Fautanu and Frazier and McCormick are all very experienced, very successful, all championship caliber college players, guys that have been there and done that, won a bunch. I think that offensive line is really poised to be much like that group was for the previous generation. Let's be honest. I mean, nobody thought Lev and AB were leaders, right? And
No.
like Ben did his thing, but he was not necessarily like that.
The
That
Galvin
type of it was Pouncey and DeCastro and Al and Foster, and so I think the offensive line can be that for this unit again. I think that's a lot to put on a group that's got 3 rookies in it for this year. I think it's going to take some time, and they've got to play well. It doesn't matter if you're
Right.
the best leader in the world if you're not doing a good enough job to stay in the lineup or to be an above average player. It doesn't really matter, and so. But I like the potential there for that group to take on that role going forward and really be something that can rally this offense. Clearly, the scheme under Arthur Smith is very friendly to being an offensive line forward unit. You know, I think they're putting them out there. So we'll see if that can happen. I mean, that's where the culture has to come from for me because there's too much uncertainty at quarterback. I don't know if the skill position players are it. I think it's the offensive line.
You mentioned Broderick Jones is one of those guys. We got to talk for him a little bit at the end of the OTAs last week. Here's Broderick Jones from Steelers OTAs. And again, just listen to the way that he talked, especially when he talks about his teammates and what he's trying to do to help them develop. Here's Broderick Jones from Steelers OTAs.
Broderick, I know it's just OTAs and it's just football in shorts, but do you feel like the offense has had a little bit more to kick to it competing against the defense this time here compared to this time last year?
I wouldn't necessarily say that, just because I think, well, me being a rookie last year, I always got the bad end of the stick, the short end of the stick. So for me, it's always been the same. Just coming in prepared to work. You know, with the new offense, I feel like it's coming along and clicking like a little bit better than last year. So, you know, I'm just ready to get to camp and, you know, make all those fine tunes and the adjustments and, you know, see what we really can do.
I feel like you guys are further along in knowing what your identity is supposed to be this year because mid-season last year, that was still a question that you guys were trying to figure out.
Yeah, I do think we have an identity. I think we want to lean on the offensive line and the run game and our running backs, but we still have the ability to go over your head as well too. So I feel like we have a happy median between like what kind of plays we can run and like what kind of play style like that everybody can play at. But we have so many good players on the offensive side of the ball that no matter what it is, as long as all 11 execute their assignment, I think we'll be okay. So.
How are Troy and Mason and Zach coming along as rookies?
You know, I was like thinking yesterday, like it's crazy because I look at them and I think about like how I came in last year and needed like a whole bunch of fine tuning, and I just see them developing like each and every day, like getting better at one thing. So it's just like kind of crazy because they look at me like for support, but like I was just in their shoes last year. But you know, I just try and help out as much as I can. You know, they're doing great. You know, everything's not perfect, but like I told them yesterday, like, you're going to make mistakes. You're still young. You still have a lot of football to learn. But at the end of the day, football is still football. Like, don't overthink it. Don't try and overcomplicate it. And, just play football and everything will work out. So.
Anything you learned last year?
I don't think I've had a conversation with them, like, about, like, what not to do and what to do, just because everything is still so fresh to them. And, just giving them time to, get their foot in the door and, just actually like figure out everything, figure out all the ropes and, just do what they can for right now. And then, like when camp comes up, it's going to be, it's a whole nother level of football that you got to have your mindset on. So, probably like closer time to when camp comes around, I'll have a conversation with them and, just give them my best wishes and just hope for the best.
Amongst you guys, with so many new guys, rookies coming in here, like you said, have looked really good so far. A lot of intensity with those guys in there.
It definitely is, but we know it's a competition. But I feel like us, like as the old linemen, like being able to play the game, we don't look at it like as a competition between us. I feel like that's like one of our best qualities, like as offensive tackles in the league, because we help each other as much as possible. me and Dan hang out all the time. He comes over to my house. We hang out all the time. So it's just like, yeah, we know it's a competition. Like, everybody knows it's a competition. Coach lets us know it's a competition. But at the end of the day, I don't feel like we look at it like that. I don't feel like it's no bad blood between nobody, you know what I'm saying? So just with us being able to have that relationship and just continue to do what we love, I feel like that's a big blessing for all of us.
Broderick, you said it's a next step. It's a big next step next week. Do you feel the offense is ready for that next step? How's the install gone?
I feel like the offense is doing great, you know. We haven't installed a lot of different things just because we're trying to get the basics out the way and just continue to just pound it and just continue to just try and be the best, have it looking the best, and having all 11 people on the same page at the same time. So we've really just been doing really basic stuff, not nothing too complicated. So I feel like when we actually like really open up the playbook and just like see what we can do like as an offense, I feel like we'll be a dangerous offense.
So there you have it, Broderick Jones with there from OTAs. And the thing that I continue to be impressed, Alan, by Alan here is I see this guy respond very maturely to questions and think forwardly ahead of things, because there's answering maturely about yourself, but this is a guy who clearly understands it's not just about him playing better, it's also about him helping Zach Frazier, helping Troy Fautanu, and also like being mindful at Dan Moore Jr.'s, you know, in the fourth year of his career and how they're all playing together. And you hear him talk about like, hey, like, yeah, sure, we're competing, but we're not really competing against each other as much as we are, you know, we are competing against each other, but it's not like we're doing this to try to spite each other and destroy each other in this. And I think that there's a sense that when you hear this guy, like, he seems to get it, at least at this stage of his career, how he can be a positive part of this Steelers locker room. And that's part of what you're talking about. It's the character on top of the skill and the size and everything that makes Broderick Jones a really likable young player. But it's also the character part of it and how he seems to carry himself that I think could lead to the Steelers finding the kind of leadership and culture back in the offense that they want to see.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we'll see how that develops and if that can be a contagious thing too. You know, I think it was for a lot of people the last time around. We'll see if that can be something that spreads beyond the offensive line. But I think either way, having that unit that you can rely on, that can be your rock, that can be the thing that you know that you can go to and feature and depend on, even if they don't get the culture nailed, like that's a huge step for this offense. And, you know, the other, of course, missing part of the culture is you're going to have to fit a new quarterback into it at some point. Unless one of these, maybe unless it's Justin Fields, you know, he could be a long-term answer. But, you know, usually your quarterback is going to have a big part of your culture too. And we're still pretty uncertain about what that's going to look like in the future.
Absolutely. There's still a lot of questions to be answered about how things are moving forward. But I think, again, a big part of what Mike Tomlin has to do, you know, Mike Tomlin isn't the guy who calls all the plays all the time. Like, he's not the guy that's going to override everyone's job and overreach like Belichick did. But what he does, you know, do very well. And what people give him a lot of credit for is he makes sure that culture and that the locker room, and that there's respect, that people want to play for him, that it's a place that people want to come to. That's why Patrick Queen came to the Steelers. That's why Russell Wilson came to the Steelers. There's a lot of guys who come and sign for the Steelers. Deshaun Elliott, you know, you can go back over the years of all the players that have signed with the Steelers, and they say, hey, Mike Tomlin, we want to play for that guy because that guy sets the tone. He gives us, he's the leader that we want to get behind, and he has that reputation across the NFL. So again, you know, I look to the Steelers' lack of, you know, playoff success or the problems that you can say. And sure, Mike Tomlin has his flaws. This is not to say that he doesn't have anything wrong. But when you reach to start trying to make everything his fault, I think you overlook all the good things that he does and the things that have kept the Steelers afloat. Let's be real, Alan, with the excess of talent that they've had over the past several years, this team should have tanked. This team should have been bottom of the barrel at some point in the AFC, and especially in the AFC North that has been very competitive. I mean, this is the best the Browns have been. This is the best the Bengals have been. And the Ravens are, you know, have been on the precipice of getting back to the Super Bowl for multiple years now. All three of those franchises, the Steelers haven't finished in last place once, and they've been banging with these guys. Heck, they went 5-1 against that division last year. I think all of that is attributed to Mike Tomlin's able to keep the ship pointed in the right direction. It's just trying to get more ammunition on the ship so they can win more important battles later in the season.
Yeah, I think so. And they've got a good opportunity to do that this year. They've been good against the division. They've been good late in the year. If they can get off to a good start with this easy schedule, I think it sets up okay for them. Like I said, I'm cautiously optimistic about this team right now. I don't think they're headed for the Super Bowl, but I think they're continuing to put themselves in a better place. You know, there was a lot going on this offseason. It's been busy. You can't do it all in 1 year. This is a big rebuild. They've got, I just looked it up today, 19 new starters since the end of the 2020 season, plus a new coordinator, 2 new coordinators in there. Like that's a lot. And so, but I think, I don't know how you can't be encouraged by the moves Omar Khan's been making. And I don't know why, if you think that combination can continue to bring good results in the offseason, that it won't eventually carry on into the regular season and the postseason.
Absolutely. Questions that we will continue to keep an eye on here on the Locked On Steelers podcast and at minicamp, which begins today. The Steelers have picked it back up. Myself will be there. Alan will be there with his team. We will have a lot to talk about as Steelers minicamp rolls on. Alan, let people know they can find you, follow you, get more of your work.
At @Saunders_PGH on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, if you're into that kind of thing. And SteelersNow.com. Definitely check out all the content there. Got lots of stuff going on. And my podcast is Steelers Afternoon Drive. You can find it on YouTube at Steelers Now or anywhere you find podcasts. That's it.
Absolutely. He's Alan Saunders. Alan, thanks so much for joining us. And thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Thanks again for everyone tuning in. Back tomorrow, I'll talk about Steelers minicamp here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.